Hello there, and welcome once more to another edition of the Open Door Show from Property CEO. My name's Ritchie Clapson, and of course, it's great to have you with us. Always great to have you with us, whether you're listening to it, I don't know, maybe in the day, maybe in the evening, maybe first thing in the morning, whilst you're running on the podcast, because Open Door is now available as a YouTube video and, of course, as a podcast. Of course, the downside of the podcast is you can't see me or our guests, but hey, maybe that's an advantage. Over the next 30 minutes, I was always going to be taking a deep dive into the world of small-scale property development and, importantly, have a bit of fun doing it. Talking to movers, shakers, people out there that are bringing you the inside track all about the world of property development. I'm really pleased with today's guest. Today's guest, what a good bit of an all-rounder here. If you're based in the West Country, wow, I've got a great opportunity for you, particularly if you're getting into development or you are into development. If you're not in the West Country, well, just listen up, because I tell you what, this guy is going to tell you about some really interesting things. On today's show, I've got a gentleman called Tony Horsey. He's come from a company called Ortus Project Managers. Tony, welcome to today's show. How are you?
Hi, Ritchie. Thanks for having me. I'm good. I'm really pleased to be here and quite excited at the prospect of being a mover and shaker.
A mover and a shaker. That's how I've described you, a mover and a shaker. I think that's good. Tony, whereabouts are you based? Where are you talking to us from today?
So the office is in Torquay in South Devon, and we work all across the southwest from Exeter down to Plymouth. So we've got projects all across Exeter and nudging into all across Devon, nudging into Cornwall, and a couple in Somerset. So yeah.
So if you go above Exeter, you get a nosebleed, I guess, do you?
Yeah, I can a bit of a head for height, but I don't go too far. Yeah, as far as Taunton, a little bit of Somerset, but I'm not going too far.
Wow. What a great part of the world it is down there. A great part of the world. I think a lot of people will be super jealous. Now, look, folks, Tony is a project manager, but actually he's got a bit more of a background to it, which makes it quite interesting. Tony, can you just give us a bit of background to you and what Ortus is all about, please?
Yeah, no, happy to. So been working in architecture about 30 years, studied for a degree at North London, postgrad at Kingston, worked in large-scale commercial practices initially, and then worked in smaller practice, focusing more around development. Over the last 15 to 20 years, just when I got Harold, my children, about 20 years, is when I first did my first development project.
You're just trying to work out how old you are, Tony, and now the realization has just hit home.
That's exactly it. I look at it, suddenly I think, oh, it was about 10 years ago. No, my daughter, who's now 25, was 6, so it wasn't 10 years ago. Yeah, so I am getting old. So did my first new build development project about 20 years ago in Wiltshire, delivered 7 houses. And since then, I've been sort of mixing architectural consultancy on my own with a bit of property development. And as I mentioned briefly, most architects think they know everything. And it wasn't until I started being a developer and getting my hands in the ground, I realised how little I knew. So that's probably my experience in the world of development is probably the biggest learning I've had since we started.
And so architectural background, developer as well, developing for 20 years. So that's a great CV of experience. And then project managing your own jobs. But how does Ortus come about? How long has Ortus been running, and who's it here to serve?
So I set Ortus up about 4 years ago. As I say, I've been sort of mixing and matching with doing some development, doing some consultancy over the years. And I decided I wanted to set up a consultancy that was going to just continue alongside whatever else I get up to. That's where Ortus came from. We specialize really in working with developers as opposed to private clients. And I use my experience as a developer to support them with a sort of wider scope of services beyond that a normal architect.
And in terms of services, does Ortus also offer architectural and planning services alongside the project management because of your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a number of clients of varying levels of experience. We've got 2 or 3 quite novice developer clients, and we work with them from pre-acquisition. We'll do feasibility work, market appraisals, that sort of stuff. Then we'll do the design and planning. On the smaller projects, we tend to manage the planning ourselves, but we know our limits. So I've got a scheme at the moment for 36 houses where we've brought in a planning consultant. So it's understanding at what point you need the additional support. We do as much as we can in-house, but ultimately, to do the job properly, you need to know who you have on board. So we do design planning, on-site project management, tender management. We work across the board and then work with them through till they either hand the keys over to a tenant or a new owner, and then hopefully start on the next one.
Brilliant. Look, everyone out there listening to this, it's a scary world getting into development. Development is not easy. We always tell you that. In lots of ways, it's simple, but it's not easy. And having the right people around you is essential. Okay, it's essential, and it's very comforting to have that skill and expertise. I think it's a great combination, and I think it'll be interesting. We're gonna sort of quiz Tony on a few things today, give you a bit of an inside track, because really interesting to have architect, project manager, planning consultant, all wrapped up into one. As Tony said, he knows his limitations of what he can do, but also a developer, so they know what you're going through. Tony, I'm going to ask you a question here because I think this is going to be really interesting if we can tease this out of you. Okay. New developers, you work with quite a few new developers. Okay, yeah. Give me the top 3 things. And just don't hold back, because you're not going to upset anyone. Give us the top 3 things that new developers get wrong when they get into property development.
Okay. So in my experience, they come to me and they've spent too much, or they offer too much. First things first, they don't understand what they're getting into, and they get very excited about a project, and they pay too much for the site. So I would say that's very often the first issue that I have to confront. And there are ways we manage it. And interesting on that, I think the last decade has probably supported people through that. Whilst we've had some cost fluctuation recently, the house prices have continued to rise. So where people have been maybe a little less than cautious in the purchase, they've been carried by the market. And I just think, I don't see the market diving anytime soon, but I think that's going to soften a bit. So there's some pain to be had if you don't get that right going forward.
Yeah. I think that's interesting. And I always used to say to people, and I've seen this collapse back in 2008, Tony, I'm sure you experienced various things there with clients, that I used to say I could teach my mother, and my mother could develop in a rising market. She's got no problem at all, because the market, as you say, carries you forward. But of course, imagine how much money people could make should they get that price right. So they're getting this purchase price wrong. What's the reason for that? Is it purely a lack of understanding of how to calculate the deal? Is it the emotion kicking in? Is it all of the above?
I think there's a little bit of optimism based around hope. I think actually that leads on to my second point, which is choosing the right builder. And that's not as straightforward as it sounds. A number of times people have come to me, or potential clients have come to me and said, I'm working with my contractor and he says he can do it for this. And the contractor's given them a price based on planning drawings. And it's not right. And so they are, they've tied themselves in with someone who says, I can live that for 40 grand a unit. And sometimes you can, but not every time. And it's that lack of understanding of detail. They're then sort of relying too much on someone who has actually at that point no commitment to it. And they're looking at some work going forward. So I would think that's, in my experience, that's the most common, is not having a proper understanding of what those costs are going forward.
So what we're talking about here is they don't understand the costs, how to analyze a deal properly. Okay, hence they're potentially overpaying, almost on advice from a builder who probably got good intentions, is not means well, but the builder is literally almost sticking a finger in the air based on a set of planning drawings. And can you perhaps just describe, because some people might not know the difference. I see this quite a lot. Tony, what would be the difference between planning drawings that a builder might price on and, let's say, tender drawings? What's the difference between those two, so people understand? Perhaps we could just pick up on that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, in simple terms, the drawings are for planning. It's just say it's an art project. If I go back to my sort of original training, my first degree was it's basically an art degree, and so I can produce images of your buildings, your homes, and I can make them look really nice. And they're to scale and it's accurate, but there's no detail. Construction and tender drawings, we then start getting into the real fabric of the building, understanding the structure, what's holding what up, looking at into roofs, into the foundations, into drainage, and it's that level of detail. You can't have that up front. You've got to understand it when you're buying. You've got to understand the implications. but until you get that level of detail, you can't get a really accurate cost. And so, a builder comes in and said, we've got a project that we're going to buy this old care home and we're going to turn it into some flats. And I can do that for, I can knock those out for 40 grand a unit. Well, that's great, but are we messing around with drainage? Because there's a big cost in there if we haven't do a lot of change there. Is there a lot of structural change? There's a big cost in there. And where in that 40 grand is all of this being considered? Planning drawings they may show some level of detail, but they don't have that. So that oversight, that understanding of actually the implications of, we've just moved that wall a bit, understanding what the implications of that are that's important at that early stage. And I think you're right. The builder is very open, not necessarily trying to pull a fast one, is honest, but just at that point has got no detail. So I've done a few of these with generally knocking them out for this much.
I think there is as well. I mean, as you said, I think the builder has got no liability. He's got no commitment to the scheme. He's helping you out as a favour. Whereas if we as developers, we go out and we could work with someone like Ortus, whether you cost it yourselves or you bring cost consultants in, actually getting it costed by cost consultant, quantity surveyor with professional indemnity insurance, they have liability, don't they, to back themselves up?
Yeah, they do. If they go in and say that's going to cost you $500,000, and then you go out to tender and it comes in $1 million, you can challenge them on that because you've just spent a lot of time and energy, and they, on something you can't afford. So there are varying degrees. Obviously, if you start getting QSs involved or going down that road, there's a cost. There's a cost to that, and so it depends on the scale of the project, how much detail you go into, and where. But I think the key to that, I said the first thing is you pay too much. The key to that is having someone advising you from the beginning who can see what's coming, who knows, what, that roof needs replacing, or these floors that needs doing, or all the drainage needs. Someone who can just think, right, we need to allocate £30,000 just to that bit. That level of experience and oversight is important at that early stage.
And I think it is be fair to say, although we said probably the builder is saying the right things, the builder is in sales mode. So the builder wants to be in a position where he says, I can knock them out for 40 grand a unit, because he wants you to be interested in them. Whereas a consultant is there to give you very independent advice. And if you don't like the answer, you can shoot the messenger if you want, but that doesn't make sense. So, yeah. So going back there, so the number one thing is really understanding your numbers, understanding the deal, okay, how it works, how it stacks up, not getting emotionally attached to it. And then feeding in then is the second one. It's not actually getting a builder in. Knowing who you need to get in straight away is important. And it's not a builder to give you his price. What about, is there anything else on that second point, or do you want to move on to the third point of things that people do wrong?
No, I think the second point of it, it's also expanding, is making sure that when you do start talking to a contractor, you're talking to the right one, because there are different building contractors that are good at different things. And one of the most common mistakes is my mate, my cousin is a builder, and he is, and probably a very good, or she, it's a modern world, probably a very good builder, but unless they've got experience of doing what you're doing, they don't know what to expect. And that's one of the reasons. So it's making sure the people you're talking to are experienced in what you need to deliver. And I think that's another, one very good, very reputable jobbing builder who does, spent a career doing simple house extensions, isn't necessarily the right person to rip out an old hotel and turn it into A flats. It's a different scale of work, and it's something that they've not been exposed to. So I think in that second point, I would say it's making sure that you're looking at the right people.
And how do you do that? Because how do you choose, as a developer, how would any new developers listeners, how would they go out and how would they choose that right builder to do their project, the right contractor?
I think the reality is you just need to be exposed to a lot of them. You need that network. You need someone who's got that network. You need to be able to speak to someone who's saying, and say, my project looks like this. This is the sort of scale. This is the sort of budget. And I'd like to be speaking to 3 or 4 people who work on stuff of that scale. And the only way you have access to that is if you've got an existing and established network across the board of projects of different scales and different types. We've got a very good contractor down here who specialises in commercial new builds, and they're really good at it. So I wouldn't get them to do a residential refurb. It's the right contractor, and you have to have that. You have to have that network, or know someone's got that network. That's the key to getting that bit right.
And so at the end of the day, as a new developer, you don't have that network. So the answer has to be, we've got to go, Tony, to someone like you, particularly if we were in the West Country, the West Country, knocking on your door. You have that a network which is well established, used by you in lots of circumstances. You'll better choose the right horse for the race that we want.
I can certainly direct clients. And I think, yes, I have a large network, and yes, I can direct clients towards 2 or 3 appropriate contractors. What they then need to do, and this is where a lot of them fall down, I suppose this is probably a subsection of point 2, is...
We like subsections. Let's go for subsection. This is 2.2 we're on.
2.2, exactly, is it's business, you're not friends. And so you've got to be okay being a bit not brutal, but certainly straightforward in the questions you ask. Challenge them. They need to be able to give you comfort. You're getting into a project that's going to take up a lot of capital, whether it's yours or capital you're borrowing. They're liable, they're responsible for a big investment. And so right from the off, you've just got to set a really quite upfront tone of, I will ask you questions and I expect answers. And if you're not comfortable with the answer they give you, push them on it. Don't be shy. What I often get from new developers is, I have to listen to them because they're the ones advising me. Well, no, they're not. You need to have an advisor, or you need to know the questions to ask. So be a little bit canny in the way that you engage with them.
I like that. Don't invite the builder around for a barbecue on a Saturday night. That's not what you want to do. Not
till he's finished on time and on budget. Then he's your friend. But
promise the barbecue at the end. Okay, what's your third point then? So we've got getting the numbers wrong. We talked about the builder. We've had some subsets of that. What about point number 3?
I say point number 3 is actually back to numbers, but later in the day is cost management. Is understanding that you've got a decent cost plan when you go into it. You know what things cost. You know how that relates to the program. It's making sure you're not paying for things that haven't been done. If we're working on bigger projects and we've got JCT contracts in place, everything is quantified. You've got a bit of quants, your QS has done this, they come down and do surveys and you pay for exactly what's done. On smaller projects, you can't get to that level of detail, but you can take the same approach. It's understanding, if in their budget, if they're building some foundations or all the groundwork and the drainage, the budget for that is, let's say £10,000. That actually, once they're out of the ground, that's all you've paid, regardless of what else is going on. They might want a bit more, but they've only done that. So it's making sure through the construction project that you manage cost and you manage program, because those two things are completely intertwined. And if you don't have a grasp on it, then at the end of the initial 8-9 months that the builder said it would take, when they're only 70% finished, but you've spent 95% of the budget, they're going to be coming back and asking you for more. And unless you've seen that coming, unless you've had the chance to manage it, which is by managing those costs all the way through, then you're going to get caught. And that's among the most common experiences I have of novice developers.
But as a novice developer, we should not be trying to manage these projects ourselves because we don't have experience. We need someone like Ortus alongside us to manage it for us. That's what we need. I know that's, in a way, you would say it, wouldn't you? Because that's what you do. But that's absolutely true, isn't it?
I think for a degree of impartiality, I'll take the reference to Ortus out. But absolutely, you're about to commit a substantial amount of money into something that, by your description there, you don't know what you're doing. So somewhere in there needs to be someone who does know what they're doing and is overseeing all of that. I know with your CEO, property CEO, you're very much about manage a team, don't manage the project. But that's about making sure that the team have got the overview. The team have got your back, I suppose. They know what your motivations are, your directions are. They know everything. You need someone in there whether it's a project manager or, it may be a builder, but maybe the builder's JVing with you. Okay, there are different ways of doing this. But if you don't know the questions to ask, you need to have someone on side that does and is willing to show you what questions to ask or ask them for you.
I like that. And I would, as an aside, just to add something there, I would definitely say do not JV with your builder, because that's something you might be tempted to do, because the builder say, hey, I can help fund it. The reality, they might not be help funding, it's just their trade accounts. So they're not actually putting any money in. And at the end of the day, you've got poacher gamekeeper going on, because you've got a builder who's JVing with you, and he's got one foot in the camp trying to charge you extras, and he's also a 50% shareholder saying, well, I think those extras are genuine. And so definitely don't JV with a builder. You don't need to. And I think that point of having someone control your numbers, you can't do this. You've got to get someone in. You need an Ortus in your life. You need someone like that to run and control it. I love those 3 points, Tony. I know a lot of people, let's just move on to the professional team, because you talked about, the way we teach people to be developers is be the CEO and assemble that team. Now, unusually, Ortus has quite a few services within it, but clearly you don't have everything. You don't have structural engineering. I guess you don't do maybe lighting consultancy, maybe landscape. I don't know, maybe some civils. How do people build that team? Because a lot of people are really concerned about building a professional team. What advice would you give to a novice new developer on how they build their team?
It all comes down to experience, Richie, to be honest, and you can't just get experience. So I would say the first thing, if you're building a team, you need to get that key member, that person who has that oversight. If you're a CEO, you've got your various departments have got directors, so that actually all they're doing is keeping you advised. So you need to make sure that you've got that person who says, right, I'm going to have a bit of a rant here. Our industry, construction, has got more and more complicated. There are now infinitely more consultants and specialisms than there were 1,000 years ago. Sorry.
You weren't around 1,000 years ago, Tony. Surely.
It feels like it sometimes. But some of them, if you're building an airport, absolutely, you need a massive team. If you're building a small development project, it's understanding what's relevant. So you need that first person, that first core member of your team will say, we are going to need this and this and this. For planning, you're going to need that and that and that. You don't need all those things. Those will be enough. And we will need a structural engineer to do this, and we will need a drainage engineer or whatever. It's someone who's got that knowledge and experience, because they're the ones that are going to help you assemble the team. And then beyond that, and that person will have, a network of contractors and a network of contacts that you can draw in. And from my perspective, I wouldn't, the danger you run there is you give too much control to one person. But for me personally, I wouldn't say, right, I'm going to use these people. I'm going to say, you need these services, and here are various consultants or various contractors, who can deliver this for you.
So in terms of if someone just I think the message here is, if you just meet one person, well, let's say it's your project manager or your architect, they all know other people, so they can start introducing. They're not going to say, "Oh, use my mate Joe." That's not good. But if they say, "Hey, I've got a few people. I know Joe. I know Karen. I know Michelle, and I know Rob." Have a chat with all of them. They're really good architects, and see which one you like. So they can go and do that. Now, I know you've got a networking group. We'll talk about that in a minute, just before we wrap up today, very briefly. But where do professionals hang out? Because I know a lot of people, they go to a lot of these property networking meetings. We speak on the PIN circuit, Property Investors Network, Simon's Ritchie's business around the country. A lot of people say, "Oh, do we meet them there?" Well, reality is they're not. Industry professionals don't hang around at those meetings. Where was the best place to hang around to meet industry professionals?
I suppose, I will give my little networking group a plug, but in the first instance, most industry bodies, the RICS or the RIBA or whomever, they all have local networks and they run little events, and you can probably introduce people there. Beyond that, they tend not to cluster, except at I've set up a little networking group. Tell
us about your networking group, because that's called the Property Development Forum. It's down in the West Country, I think, in 3 towns. Tell us about that.
Okay, no, that's great. So we set up in Torquay originally after COVID, because I was going to events that stopped. So I thought I'd start my own, and we focus on developers. We then expanded, so we now run events in Plymouth and in Exeter as well. So we do 2 a month, and we run an online one webinar, which is more informative. So the events are quite informal. They're just networking. There's no presentations, no speakers, no selling. But we focus on bringing landowners, developers and investors together. If we can bring them together, then development opportunities happen. And of course, the byproduct of that is they tend to be full of consultants, these events. So we have architects, we have highways engineers, drainage engineers, planning consultants. Each event is hosted by what we call our ambassadors. So we have an ambassador from property law, we'll have an ambassador from property finance, from design and planning, construction management, project delivery, and then sales and acquisition. So each event is hosted by 5 people from those different sectors, and they're there to answer questions and to help you out. And as I say, they tend to be filled with other consultants. And I keep getting asked why I allow other architects to come to my events, but the truth is I'm not the right architect for every project.
No.
And it's just about, it's a big world. There's plenty of business. I'm quite relaxed that, if I'm not the right person, go and speak to someone else.
No, I think so. Look, it looks. I've not been, but have a look. What's the website for it, Tony?
www.propertydevelopmentforum.co.uk.
So check that out, propertydevelopmentforum.co.uk. Have a look at that. I think it's quite unique. I don't know of any other people running those sort of events where you've got industry professionals. And as Tony said, RICS, the institutions, RIBA, Royal Institute of British Architecture, go to those places. They might be able to tell you. Or once you meet that person, say, where do you hang out? I mean, I don't know. Maybe Tony hangs out down the Dog and Crook in Torbay on a Friday night. But where is it he hangs out? And there's always going to be those sort of places. Tony, look, it's been absolutely great. If people want to contact you at Ortus, can you give me some contact details? We'll put those in the show notes as well. But how can people get hold of you? Yeah,
happy to. Well, we've got an office number 01803 321 279, or just drop me an email, tony@ortus-group.co.uk.
And what's the website for Ortus?
Ortus-group.co.uk with some W's in front of it.
And some W's in it as well. So they're just challenging in their matrix. Look, folks, we'll put those details in the show note. If you're down in the West Country, definitely in developing, reach out. Or if you want to shoot down that way, hop into one of those networking meetings, go onto his website. I think that would stand you in a lot of stead. And Tony probably knows people around the country. So just reach out to him. You never know where you might get on. Tony, look, thank you for coming in today. Have you enjoyed it?
It's been a great experience, Ritchie. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Great stuff, Tony. Hopefully people will reach out to you, and thank you for coming on today's show.
No, thank you again.
Thank you. Wow. Was that good? I mean, I think I think those events, Ortus Project Manager is great. Definitely reach out to them. The details will be in the show notes below. Obviously, if you're on podcast, you should pick those up as well. Pop onto YouTube. You can see it on our channel. Please like and subscribe as always. But do reach out to Tony. What a great business that is. And I think the fact that he's working with new developers, and the fact that he's a developer himself and does architecture and planning and project management, that's a really good mix. I quite like that. And he's got a networking group, so please do check those out. If you are new to property development, you're interested in getting involved here at propertyCEO, that's what we do. We train existing developers to actually do it better, and brand new developers to get going. I've got a link. Grab a pen and paper. I'll give you a link to a bit of free training if you are interested. So grab a pen and paper, write this down. propertyceo.co.uk/SFR. So that's propertyceo.co.uk/SFR. That stands for 6-figure roadmap. I put together about an hour and a half training, and that will give you a bit of an insight into property development and see whether that's for you or not. Hopefully you've enjoyed today's show, and we look forward to seeing you on the next edition of Open Door. Goodbye for now.